Welcome to this deep dive into Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. We're not just skimming the surface here.
No, no.
You've brought some serious study questions and personal notes, which tells me you're really looking to apply these ideas.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Combining a classic text like this with personal reflection suggests a real hunger for transformation, not just information.
Exactly. So let's get right to the heart of it. One of the most striking things about Frankl's approach to logotherapy is this idea that meaning can be found even in the depths of suffering. There's this anecdote from the preface that really stuck with me about Frankl asking his patients contemplating suicide why they haven't done it. It's almost paradoxical, isn't it?
Yeah, it is almost paradoxical, but that's the genius of it.
Yeah.
By asking why he's not passing judgment,
Right.
he's prompting them to uncover those hidden sources of value, those threads of meaning that even they might not be fully aware of.
It's like he's saying, hold on, there's something keeping you here. Let's figure out what that is.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And those sources of meaning might be incredibly subtle, like a connection to nature or a sense of responsibility to a loved one.
And speaking of challenging circumstances, Frankl's own experiences in Auschwitz really bring this idea to life. The way he describes his arrival, the haunting cry of Auschwitz from the train, the arbitrary cruelty of the selection process, it's chilling.
It is.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that Frankl isn't just recounting these horrors for shock value. He's setting the stage for how meaning can be found even in the most brutal, dehumanizing environments.
Right, like when he talks about becoming just a number, the shock, numbing even the fear of death. You know, it makes me think about those times when I've felt the complete lack of meaning, that existential vacuum Frankl talks about. He said 60% of American students felt that void. I wonder if that resonates with you at all.
It's a surprisingly common experience, even outside of extreme circumstances like Auschwitz. Frankl linked it to unemployment neurosis, the feeling that without a job, you're useless. But his solution wasn't just to get a job. It was to find meaningful activities, even unpaid ones.
Wow.
That's a pretty radical idea in our hustle-obsessed culture, don't you think?
Totally. So he's saying your worth isn't tied to your productivity. Now, I know we're jumping around a bit, but one of your study questions really intrigued me, the one comparing logotherapy to psychoanalysis.
Okay.
Frankl has that witty line about how in logotherapy, the patient may remain sitting erect, but he must hear things which sometimes are very disagreeable to hear. What's he getting at there?
I think he's playfully highlighting the difference in focus.
Okay.
Psychoanalysis delves into the past, trying to understand the why behind our current state. Logotherapy, while acknowledging the past, is more concerned with the what now.
Okay.
What can we do? What meaning can we create moving forward?
That's a really helpful distinction.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how Frankl uses humor even in the context of Auschwitz. It's like finding those small moments of joy, a shared joke or a beautiful sunset, becomes an act of defiance against the dehumanization.
Exactly. It's a way of reclaiming your humanity, your individuality, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. And that brings us to another key concept in logotherapy, this idea that even in the most restrictive environments, we retain a certain degree of inner freedom.
Okay, I get the freedom part, but what about responsibility? Frankl even proposed a statue of responsibility on the West Coast to balance out the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
I admit that image feels a bit much.
He could be a bit dramatic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But his point is crucial.
Okay.
Freedom without responsibility can be dangerous. It's not enough to just acknowledge our freedom to choose. We have to make meaningful choices. Choices that align with our values and contribute to something larger than ourselves.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about doing good.
You could say that. Frankl believed that a life focused solely on pleasure or avoiding pain ultimately leads to emptiness. True fulfillment comes from finding meaning in something bigger than ourselves, whether that's through creative work, loving relationships, or even in our attitude towards suffering.
Which brings us to this seemingly bleak but ultimately profound idea of the tragic triad, pain, guilt, and death. It doesn't exactly scream uplifting podcast material, does it?
Not at first glance. But this is where Frankl introduces the concept of tragic optimism.
Okay.
He's not denying the tragic elements of life. He's saying we can find meaning despite them.
Okay. I'm struggling with this one. How can you be optimistic in the face of tragedy? Help me understand.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Guilt can be a catalyst for positive change. Our awareness of death can inspire us to live more fully, and even suffering itself can be a source of growth and wisdom.
So it's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about finding those glimmers of meaning, even in the darkest of places.
Exactly, and those glimmers might not be grand or earth-shattering.
Right.
Remember the story of the dying woman in the camp finding meaning in the simple beauty of a chestnut tree?
Oh, yeah. That
Yeah.
was so powerful.
Yeah.
It's like she found a connection to something eternal, something beyond the confines of the camp.
And that's what Frankl is trying to show us, meaning isn't this elusive thing we have to chase down? It's often found in the everyday, in the small moments, in the connections we make, in the way we choose to respond to our circumstances.
It's about shifting our focus from, why is this happening to me, to what can I do with this experience? Frankl's idea of meaning isn't passive. It's a call to action.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about shifting our focus from why is this happening to me to what can I do with this experience? Frankl's idea of meaning isn't passive, it's a call to action.
You know, it's funny, we talk about finding meaning in the everyday, but sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. Like, does every cup of coffee need to be a spiritual experience?
That's a great point. It's not about turning every mundane task into a quest for the meaning of life.
Right.
It's more about cultivating an awareness of the potential for meaning in every situation, even the difficult ones.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's less about finding meaning in everything and more about being open to finding meaning even in unexpected places.
Exactly. Frankl talks about this idea of new dynamics, this tension between what we've already achieved and what we still long to accomplish. It's that feeling of, I'm not done yet, there's more I want to do more, I want to experience.
That makes me think of all the times I've felt stuck, like I'm just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Is that what Frankl would call the existential vacuum?
It could be a sign of it, yes. That feeling of emptiness, of purposelessness, can be a real struggle.
Right.
And it's not always easy to pinpoint the cause.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a major life change. Sometimes it's a slow creep of dissatisfaction.
So how do we deal with that? Do we just need to find a new hobby or something?
It's not always that simple, unfortunately.
Right.
Frankl believed that addressing the existential vacuum requires a deeper examination of our values, our priorities, and our understanding of what truly matters.
Okay, so it's more about figuring out what gives our lives meaning rather than just trying to fill the void with distraction.
Exactly. And this is where Frankl's concept of paradoxical intention comes in. It's this almost counterintuitive technique where you deliberately try to do the very thing you're afraid of.
Wait, so if I'm terrified of public speaking, I should just picture the entire audience in their underwear. Is that what paradoxical intention is all about?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
But the idea is that by confronting your fear head on, you can break the cycle of anxiety. Frankl used it to help people overcome insomnia phobias, even stuttering.
So it's like you're taking away the power of the fear by intentionally leaning into it.
Exactly. And there's an element of humor in it too, which Frankl believed was essential for survival, especially in the camps. He'd encouraged his fellow prisoners to tell jokes, to imagine life after liberation.
He saw humor as a way to transcend the suffering, to find a glimmer of light in the darkness. It reminds me of that quote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow."
That's Nietzsche, but it perfectly captures Frankl's spirit. Having a strong sense of purpose can help us navigate even the most challenging circumstances.
And finding that purpose isn't always about some grand, heroic act. It can be something as simple as connecting with nature, helping a neighbor, or even just choosing to approach a difficult task with a positive attitude.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to that idea of freedom and responsibility. We have the freedom to choose our attitude even in the face of suffering. But with that freedom comes the responsibility to make choices that contribute to something larger than ourselves.
You know, sometimes I wonder if Frankl's experiences in the camps made him overly optimistic about the human capacity for good. What about those who choose to inflict suffering to dehumanize others?
That's a valid question.
Yeah.
Frankl doesn't shy away from the darkness that exists within humanity. He acknowledges the potential for cruelty and even evil, even in seemingly ordinary people. His writings about the psychology of the camp guards are a chilling testament to that.
It's a sobering reminder that we all have the capacity for both good and evil. But Frankl's focus is on inspiring us to choose the path of meaning, to find the strength to overcome adversity and create something positive out of our experiences.
He believed that meaning is not something that is given to us, but rather something we create. It's an active process, a choice we make in each and every moment.
And that choice, I think, is ultimately what defines us. Not the circumstances we face, but how we choose to respond to them.
That's the essence of logotherapy. It's about finding the courage to confront our fears, to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, and to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Frankl offers a few concrete steps. He talks about finding meaning in work, in love, and in our attitude towards suffering.
Okay, let's break those down.
Yeah.
What does he mean by finding meaning in work? I mean, not all of us are brain surgeons or rocket scientists.
He's not talking about finding a glamorous or high-paying job. It's more about finding a sense of purpose in whatever we do, whether it's paid or unpaid work, creative pursuits, or even just the everyday tasks of life.
So it's about approaching our work with intention, with a sense of contributing something valuable, even if it's just making someone's day a little brighter.
Exactly. And finding meaning in love isn't just about romantic relationships. It's about cultivating deep connections with others, experiencing the joy of giving and receiving love in all its forms.
That makes sense. So what about finding meaning in suffering? That one's a little harder to wrap my head around.
It's not about glorifying suffering or pretending it's not painful. It's about acknowledging the inevitability of suffering in life and choosing to find meaning in the way we respond to it.
So it's about finding growth in the midst of pain, learning from our challenges, and using our experiences to become more compassionate and resilient.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, there's always a spark of hope, a possibility for growth and transformation.
Frankl's story is a testament to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
He found meaning in Auschwitz in the midst of unimaginable suffering.
And that's what makes his message so powerful and enduring. He shows us that even in the face of tragedy, we have the power to choose hope, to find meaning, and to create a life that is worth living.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying that the meaning we create through suffering can be even more profound than the meaning we find in comfort and ease.
Right. There's a depth to that idea. It's not about seeking out suffering, of course, but recognizing that it's an inevitable part of life and that we have the power to choose how we respond to it.
Yeah.
That reminds me of another one of your study questions about the dangers of hyperintention. I have to admit, I chuckled when I read that. Is Frankl talking about those overly enthusiastic self-help gurus?
He might have had a good laugh about those too. But I think what he's getting at is this idea that we can't force meaning or happiness.
Right.
The more we grasp for it, the more it eludes us.
It's like that saying, happiness is a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder.
A beautiful analogy. Yeah.
And it speaks to Frankl's belief that happiness is a byproduct of a life lived with meaning and purpose.
Right.
It's not the goal itself, but rather something that emerges naturally when we're engaged in something larger than ourselves.
This whole conversation makes me think about how often we get caught up in the pursuit of external validation, material possessions,
Yeah.
the fleeting pleasures that our culture tells us are the keys to happiness.
It's a constant challenge, isn't it, to stay grounded in what truly matters amidst all the noise and distractions.
Yeah.
But Frankl reminds us that we have the power to choose to shift our focus from the external to the internal, from the fleeting to the enduring.
And that brings us back to his powerful idea of tragic optimism, finding meaning and hope even in the face of suffering. It's not about denying the pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing to find those glimmers of light even in the darkest of moments.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the joy and sorrow, the triumphs and setbacks, knowing that even in the midst of tragedy, there's always a possibility for growth and transformation.
Well, this has been a truly insightful deep dive into man's search for meaning. We've explored Frankl's profound insights into the human condition, his experiences in the concentration camps, and his powerful philosophy of logotherapy.
We have.
We've delved into the concepts of the will, to meaning, the existential vacuum, tragic optimism, and paradoxical intention. We've examined the importance of finding meaning in work, in love, and in our attitude towards suffering.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we've been challenged to reflect on our own lives, to consider where we find meaning and how we can live more purposefully, even in the face of life's inevitable challenges.
Frankl's work is a timeless reminder that meaning is not something that is given to us, but rather something we create.
Right.
It's a choice we make in every moment, a responsibility we bear as free and conscious beings.
So as you continue your journey with man's search for meaning, I encourage you to keep these questions in mind. Where do you find meaning in your own life? What gives your life purpose? And how can you live more intentionally, more authentically, more meaningfully each and every day? Remember, Frankl found meaning in Auschwitz. Where will you find it?